Now. Okay, fantastic. Let's jump right into it. We have only an hour, so bonjour tout le monde, and welcome to the second day of PowerSkills 2021. The Courage Strikes Back. So it's hosted by the Career Advising and Transition Services of McGill School of Continuing Studies. And in case you don't already know by now, this next level virtual career summit is here to help you gain the most important soft skills, learn industry-specific guidance, and give you all you need to thrive in today's reality. So get ready, everyone. It's Power Hour. And like the title says, we've got Canada's leading expert ready to answer all of your questions. So my name is Nayo Gariepi, and I'm a career advisor at the CACEE team. I'm currently in Montreal, and I would love to also know where you're all joining us from. So hi, Alexandra here. Hang Jong, feel free to put your camera on. As soon as we start, we're going to go on speaker mode. So you're still going to be protected from being online. And meanwhile, I also want to say a thanks to our ambassador and a person who's going to be working the magic behind the scene, Melissa Mezzacapa. So yeah, feel free to say hi. And we all thank you for helping us with the chat. Now, there's a few things to know before we start. So first, like I said, the session is recorded. We will take questions at the end during the Q&A, but feel free to write them in the chat as we go. We will also share some links to continue the conversations after, and of course, how to stay connected with all of us. Now, let's introduce our amazing moderator, favorite manager, motivator, friend, and the list can go on and on until the next hour finishes. But let's also take the time to give her the proper thanks for being the one who made all of this possible and who brought the idea of this summit in the first place. So Rosalia Felice, it's your time to shine.
Well, it's so fun to be introduced by Nayo. I recommend it. So I recommend it to everybody here. Actually, I'm certainly not going to take the credit for this event. This was all Catherine Stace. So we asked her, do you want to be part of PowerSkills? And next thing we know, she has this incredible panel put together so that of people who understand and can help you in your career. And so they're all here to help you. So I extend the thanks to Catherine Stace, who leads.
If I can just pitch in, I was talking about the PowerSkills.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
okay,
Catherine organized the panel. She organized the summit.
PowerSkills, gotcha. Thank you, Nayo. Yeah, that was, we conceived PowerSkills because of the pandemic, and as the manager of career advising and transition services, we often saw people in person. We had so many in-person events, which were great. And then all of a sudden the pandemic hits, and it's how do we help students? How do we help the larger community given the new context? So we decided in August, let's try something like this. And it started small. The idea was to have maybe a few sessions, and it was 5 days, 57 speakers and 4,500 attendees. So we thought, you know what, we're going to do this a couple of times a year. And this is the second iteration. So we're just thrilled. And of course, for all of you with us today, we value your comments and your feedback, and we're going to send you a survey after the fact. And I include our panelists today in that. We hope to make every PowerSkills better than the one before it. But I don't want to waste any of your time, because I'm the one who's stopping you from getting your burning questions answered. So I will now introduce Catherine. We're not just going to introduce each other all day. We will actually get to your questions. So Catherine Stace, she heads she's the manager of career services at the Max Bell School of Public Policy at McGill University. But more than that, whenever I have a question, or whenever I need insight, or whenever I feel I need a lift, or any of those things, well, she's one of my go-to people, and certainly everybody at CACEE appreciates her. And she has so much knowledge, and you'll see that that's very obvious today. So I know you'll love this hour, and I don't want to take any more of it. So everyone, let's please welcome Catherine. And you can do that by using your emojis there through your actions, or doing this, or clapping, but let's make her feel warm and welcome. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Rosalia, and thank you, Nayo. I'm thrilled to be here. I think that this is an awesome initiative, and I've attended some of the sessions, and I'm blown away by how great they are. So when we sort of talked about that, doing this, I thought, hey, why don't I get together some of my favorite people? And thankfully, they all said yes, and so here we are. I'm ready to answer your most burning questions all around careers. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves so they can give you a good idea of their experience. And we're from different sectors and different regions. Anne is from Western Canada. So I'm going to ask Trevor, can you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Catherine. So welcome everyone. My name is Trevor Butchram. I am the Manager of Career Connections at the Insurance Institute of Canada. So we're the designation and education body for Canada's property and casualty insurance industry. But I have 20 plus years of experience in career education, campus recruitment, and talent acquisition. And I'm really excited to kind of be a part of the conversation and answer your questions and hopefully provide some helpful insight today. So thanks for having me.
Julie?
Hi everyone. So I'm Julie. I oversee the career services at the Faculty of Engineering of McGill University. I've been there for now more than 10 years. By background, I have a degree in engineering physics, so it's a bit weird. I worked in industry for about 10 years, and then I have another 15 years of coaching, like everything related to career transition, first in a private firm and then at McGill since 2010. So it's very helpful because I have the kind of experience and knowledge of industry for my students at the Faculty of Engineering, and all my experience coaching people, not just students, but I think it's more difficult, and I think continuing School of Continuing Studies, that's your clientele, like people who have previous experience, previous lives sometimes, to put it together in a resume. So I have 7 years of experience helping professionals with a lot of experience that you need to make sense of the story. So that's it. I talk too much, so that's it for me. I'm glad I'm here. So thanks, Catherine, for inviting me.
Thank you. Anne?
Hello, everybody. My name is Anne Garrett. I am thrilled to be here. Thank you, Catherine. I live in Red Deer, Alberta, so I'm in central Alberta. I wear a couple of different hats. I'm the owner of Career Catalyst, which is my private practice. I help clients from high school through to retirees figure their career plan and everything in between. I also am a program coordinator with an organization called Careers the Next Generation, where we work with high school students, helping them get paid work experience, paid internships and apprenticeships in central Alberta. We actually do it amongst the province. I am just a program coordinator in central Alberta. And my previous life was working at Red Deer College. So I come from a college background, and I was coordinator for career services for 10 years there. And prior to that, I worked in continuing education in the school in Red Deer College. So kind of a combination of what you're doing. And I have the pleasure of being on the national conference for CACEE, national board for CACEE, which is the Career Educators and Employers in Canada. And I have worked with Catherine and Trevor, and now with Nayo for the last couple of years. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mike?
So nice to be here, Catherine. Thanks for having me. And I feel like I'm kind of the new kid on the block. My name is Mike Bird. I'm the founder of a company called Coach Oiseau Career Coaching. I help students transition into the working world. In addition to that, I also co-host a podcast called the Career Builders Podcast. It's a weekly show for 20 and 30 somethings who are serious about building their careers. And I've had a great opportunity to meet some amazing people and career professionals through that. And in my 9 to 5, I guess you could say, I help students who are at a college here in Montreal called l'Institut Supérieur d'Informatique. I'm in IT placement, so I help to place our students in jobs and internships, specifically in the IT sector. So do lots of career stuff all the time.
Great, thank you. So we have, a bunch of knowledge here from different sectors and different regions of Canada. And I guess the first question I'm going to ask, which is on everyone's mind, has COVID-19 changed the job search process? What do you think? Mike, why don't we start with you?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Yeah, in short, for sure. At the beginning of COVID, kind of in the first wave, I saw in my work a lot of freezing, if not shedding of jobs. And so employers were very hesitant to take on anyone in an entry level or an internship role. And now I feel like we're at a point now where employers are kind of cautiously adapting their hiring processes. I'm seeing fewer full-time opportunities coming the ways of our students, but I am seeing the return of contract work in some pretty competitive companies that are attractive employers. So while I think we've come a long way in the last sort of 6 to 8 months, particularly in that sector, I know there are other sectors that have really struggled. And in terms of the process itself, obviously we've gone very virtual. If you're a little bit uncomfortable on video, now might be a good time to just spend more time on camera, because that's really how the hiring process is being done now. So one big thing right there.
Everything all remote all the time now. Anne, can we hear the Western perspective?
Sure. I mean, we were struggling with our economy prior to COVID, so it's been a tough go in Alberta for the last number of years. Our energy sector is flat, and yet there's other areas that are booming. It's very interesting. Just getting prepared for this session, I was talking with the Red Deer Chamber of Commerce, and in the answer to this question, I would say that yes, some things have changed and some things haven't. And industries that, you know, in the past, Red Deer's it's a fairly small community. I mean, it's 100,000 people, but I find that the community is really relying on each other more, whether it's cherry picking your employees or referrals, but the community, whether it's the recruiters or the job seekers, everybody seems to be asking each other for help right now, which is something that is great. I think there's been very much a team approach. We don't have the opportunity to hand in resumes in person. We didn't have a lot of that opportunity prior to COVID, but we sure don't have that now. And so that has changed. And as Mike was saying, you know, being comfortable virtually, because that's our world right now, whether we like it or not. So, so I'd say yes and no, if that's at all helpful.
Yeah, Julie, I'd love to hear from the engineering perspective.
Yeah, I think we're lucky in high tech. It was not that bad, I would say, but still we had a cut of like 50% of internship and late starts and big mess like everybody, but still there are some sectors that are doing great. I always see, because there's always some industries who struggle. So I always take the approach of like you're an individual, you just need one job. So I think it's another situation that students, they need to be super proactive, they hit the job market. So the principles, I think, remain the same. You really need to fight for your, there's the economy, there's the pandemic, the situation, but I think in terms of the process, everything has been remote, that's for sure. But otherwise, I try to still go back to the principles and be proactive, find people, connect, do networking and all that, because it always applies. There's always an industry struggle, even in high tech, in engineering. So to me, that's how I try to help my students to fight for their own sake, not thinking too much about the whole situation, because then it can be panicking, or it's hard. So
what I've noticed really is that it's amplified certain areas of the job search process. Like, you know, we've always told students, hey, you need to research those employers, but now really need to research those employers. They're, you know, you have a lot of competition. They're looking for people that really know more about them. And, you know, all your applications should be perfect. There isn't an excuse. You're not doing it off the side of your desk right now. So your applications should look good. They should be relevant. So there are, and networking. I mean, there are so many areas that have been amplified, but other ones that have disappeared, all that in-person thing. Trevor, can you tell us about Toronto, what that's like, and in the insurance sector?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that I just wanted to highlight is one of the biggest changes that I've observed in the overall job search process is the injection of a lot more humanity, right? Like if you think about it, I'm interviewing candidates now from my home, right? Or I'm having conversations, hosting networking events or whatever the case may be in my virtual environment. And I've kind of set up, you know, a corner of my 645 square foot condo to be able to do that and have like figured out ways to try and translate and be engaging, but also sometimes fire alarms go off and that's just going to be a reality. And so there's a human component that I think, or a human element that's here. Sometimes I get to meet people's coworkers, unexpected coworkers like pets or kids, you know, that kind of thing when we're in the process. And so I think just owning our humanity and bringing that into the process has been a huge part here. And to not be apologetic about it, but just to own it, acknowledge it and say, let's move on, right? If something like that happens. I think the other kind kind of piece just to know about insurance, or particularly property and casualty insurance, or in Quebec, assurance de dommage. I think one of the things that we see emerging here is fields that are essential, and insurance is certainly one of those. It's not going anywhere. It's integrated into everything that we do in life and in business. And so insurance, in terms of economic peril, people may not be driving as much, so we may see decrease in premium there, but we've seen increase in cybersecurity, for example. So we have continued needs emerging within our sector, and so continue to add individuals to our workforce, perhaps in different ways than we have previously. But I think it's also accelerated some of the needs that we've had in areas like technology and that kind of thing. The last piece that I want to say, just about sort of what we're seeing in Toronto and in Ontario in general, is that yes, there was trepidation at the beginning, but I think a number of employers have figured this out and are starting to come back to the marketplace, but they're not great at necessarily having that digital or visible presence that they would have had previously, particularly on campus. So as Catherine was saying, that research is critical, that getting out and connecting, sharing your voice and self-advocating for yourself right now as a candidate, I think is going to be the way. It's more about your personal brand than I think it's about our employer brands at this point.
If I can add one last thing too, that we're finding that a lot of the hiring right now is preempted. So we have, because we're waiting to see what's going to happen, we were hoping yesterday that more restrictions would be lifted, because in Alberta, all of our hospitality, restaurants, everything is closed down. Retail is down to 15% capacity. So we were hoping that maybe that would be lifted yesterday. We're not quite there. So employers are reaching out to hire people and doing some of the interviews, but we might need you February 1st. Or so it's sort of recruiting when you're laying off. And I know Catherine and I had used that as a topic for a conversation. But so a lot of our students are finding it a little bit frustrating, is that there's jobs advertised, they apply, they interview, but we're in a holding pattern. And it's about patience and resiliency and leaning on each other right now.
Also, I think now I'm going to move on to the next question about leveraging being a student in a pandemic. So not everyone, but a lot of people have been a student during this pandemic, and there's some skills from that you can bring over to the workplace. So what do you think, what could they leverage from being moving to that remote learning student to going into the workplace?
Go ahead, Trevor.
I just wanted to say that you have a story to tell, and craft your story, right? What is it that you've been doing during this time? What is it that you've been leveraging? What is your, where have you demonstrated, increased skill or capacity that you didn't know that you had before? Right now, I'm like a digital event producer. My sister runs a digital agency. She's like, you seem to be doing more of it than I am. And so there's this sort of, conversation that's starting with us in, recognizing that our skill sets are actually far more portable than we probably gave them credit for. And so we're using them in different ways. And I just invite you to really think about, the experiences that you've had, in the virtual learning environment, the collaboration tools that you're using, the way that you're being supportive of one another, coaching one another, facilitating skill development, and maybe even just some of the cool things that you're doing outside of the learning space. If you've been a part of a club and group, guess what? You transitioned everything that was happening face-to-face to an online environment just the same way I did in my day-to-day work. And so if you can tell that story in a really compelling way, I think you'll find that employers will really resonate with that.
I totally support what Trevor just said.
Go ahead, Mike.
I'll be quick just in adding that for sure, I think that can be a huge part of the narrative now. If you're going into the workforce, everyone's been forced to kind of learn how to be adaptable if they weren't already, and actually driving it through story, I think, is a big way of convincing employers. In addition to that, I think being aware just sort of how proactive you might have been at this point, if you have been involved in something that is perhaps maybe extracurricular in your minds, is really a sign that you aren't giving up. And that resiliency is something that employers want to see. It's been a long, hard road for both job seekers and people who are employees in companies now and have been throughout this pandemic. And some of my colleagues and people that I know who have jobs, it has not been easy for them to maintain the kind of attitude that you can bring to the table as someone who has been growing yourself throughout this difficult time. So food for thought. You're all doing more than you probably realize.
I would just echo what both Trevor and Mike said. What we're doing in the workforce right now is what our students are doing with remote learning, and all those skills are very transferable. And some of the leverage would be too is how are we looking after ourselves and others, I think too. And I think we have to look at that mental health component and how does that work into the workforce or transition to the workforce. And whether you're an employer or a student, we're all in the same boat. We may be going in different directions, or we may not be in the same boat, but we're all weathering the same storm.
So now we know that some students and workers have been laid off or weren't able to secure those summer internships. So one of the questions is always like, how do I address like this pandemic related gap in my employment? Julie, can I ask you, engineering? I don't know if engineering students have any gap in employment, but
But I think when we have a gap, I think there's always a technique to normalize the situation. Again, have a narrative, be able to explain. Often it's good to first speak with an advisor to just explain exactly what happened and what, and then after we see if it's something, how we can communicate that to an employer to explain a gap. I think this one is not too hard because we're all in the same boat. If you were able to, I don't know, explain that, I lost my job, but then I took some summer courses but I don't know what you did last summer, but I think it's to have that conversation. What did you do last summer when you lost your opportunity? And that's what you need to communicate. But sometimes we just need to rehearse or remove all the more negative vibe, or because I know sometimes you feel some shame or you're not comfortable. So I think it's good to find just a way to normalize the situation and communicate that. But that's how I would approach that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's, in the past, pre-COVID, we would tell students who weren't able to secure a summer position or people new to Canada, try volunteering. But a lot of those volunteering opportunities have dried up too. But reskilling is great, but not at the expense too of your mental health. And so for some people, taking reskilling and learning with all the amazing new courses that are online for free. But other people, it's really just important to take care of themselves. And so this is one of those things that we talk in career development all the time about knowing yourself. And I think that's the most important thing. You know what you need, and you need to feed that. And for some people, or for everybody at some point in their life, it's about yourself and taking care of yourself. I think that's really important. So then the other thing that I was asking, well, in this pandemic, what skills are employers looking for? So thankfully we have Trevor on the panel that can help us with that.
I think when we talk about the skills that employers are looking for, I think the core skills, those workplace critical skills are still very much at the forefront of the conversation. How they may have been applied during the pandemic may look a little bit different. So things like communication, teamwork, problem solving and decision making, those kinds of skill sets. I think we're also talking about things like adaptability and flexibility quite a bit, innovation, but also that forward thinking, that vision of, yes, we're in a reactive scenario right now, but how do we continue to drive our business forward so that it can be responsive to when recovery does happen? How do we position ourselves for success? What elements have we gained from our business right now that we may want to keep and continue to deliver? So like, for example, we're all gathering virtually across the country right now. There may be digital components to this conference that continue. And so, these skill sets are not things that are going to fade to the side. So keeping them sharp and continuing to think about that blended model, I think is going to be something that employers will really be looking forward to in the future. The last piece that I wanted to just add here is to anytime that you can demonstrate the skill set of that adaptability, resiliency that Mike was talking about, I think is so important. And so if you've got the opportunity to be a part of, case competitions, experiential learning, events where you've needed to put in a little bit of time and energy, it demonstrates a commitment. And if we're seeing that right now, I can't tell you, the participants in a case competition that we hosted, how much I'm willing to give back because they put that energy in as an employer. If I can see that, we know that right now you are zoomed out, that you are fatigued, that you are feeling it. To see that energy put forward and that commitment in whatever capacity, whatever that looks like in your life, will demonstrate a really great skill set that I think employers will take to heart.
And now, we're thinking about some sectors, and we always talk about the sectors that are on the decline, but some sectors have surged. They pivoted and they've surged. So what sectors do you think are most likely to surge now, have surged, or most likely to surge post-pandemic?
Certainly I can speak for IT, and it has been a relatively healthy, I don't want to say recovery, I think that's probably premature, but there has definitely been some form of renewed confidence in being able to operate. My partner works in a digital agency. Her company builds digital mobile apps for companies across Canada, grocery chain companies. The SAQ, as a matter of fact, is another client, and all of those kind of really essential places have done relatively well during the pandemic. Her company itself has, by going fully remote and doing that, making the transition relatively seamlessly, actually had a very, very strong year, probably their best ever. And so there is sort of that trend where people who have been able to master the shift to remote work have done a lot better, I think, than others. So certainly I don't think IT is going to go away anytime soon. But also just the essential services that I think will continue to get more and more innovative. It's pretty interesting when I hear that grocery stores want to develop digital apps that will actually make the process of going for groceries more interesting and helpful and enjoyable. So I think that's a pretty interesting thing to watch as we go forward, because we all need food.
I can add to it to construction. We see it in engineering. Construction is government, municipal. They all put all money. We see it. There's construction everywhere, so it's going well. And I think it's a good. It's going to be fine after the pandemic too. But you can tell there's a lot of money there, so that's a good. The game industry, the telecommunication, it's all. Manufacturing, it depends. It's so that's why it's good to do some research and unless you dream you really want to work in aerospace, maybe it's not the best time now, but there are opportunities, but it's hard. So sometimes you can start to think about an alternative that something won't be that far from your dream industry. Maybe a stepping stone to go back to aerospace when it's gonna come back to normal. So it won't last. I hope everything that's on pause is going to resume at some point. I'm confident, but I know for now, let's say you're looking for an internship for the summer, there are still some industries it's going to be a bit hard.
I think anything that's sort of experiential, so experience design right now is huge. Like if you think about, the online digital experience for sure of things like buying groceries, that's a great example, Mike. But even, if you think about like music curation or, concerts or events or things that are happening in the digital space right now, like people are logging and creating tools that make it easy for us to continue to consume that kind of content. And I think that will continue even when we go back. I think it will be the augmented reality that we've been all talking about, is taking what we've been able to create or re-engineer in the digital space and making that happen. I think things like, as well, from an experience design, the engineering, the social engineering, if you will, of things like vaccine rollout, people figuring out how to communicate these really complex messages in clear, concise ways. So the Bridgeables of the world, the people who are really focused on that experiential component in terms of making people understand these complex pieces. I think that will continue post-pandemic to be a surging area, because we realized how pivotal and important it is in this point in time.
I would agree with with what everybody has said. In Western Canada, I'm going to say particularly in Alberta right now, agriculture has been on the rise for the last couple of years. I mean, we're known for oil and gas in the energy sector. It's flat right now, and of course, with the announcement of Keystone being cancelled, it's a little bit more devastating. But agriculture has been plugging along, and according to, let me get this right now, the Industry Strategy Council, there's 4 pillars, and we've talked about becoming a digital and data-driven economy. So all that we've talked about in the IT world, being a leader in resources, so clean energy, of course, clean technology. They talk about high-value manufacturing, where we can lead globally. And leveraging our agri-foods or agriculture to feed the planet. So that's a big part of what we do in Alberta. So agriculture is huge. And it's cool too, because Old Alberta, which is about 45 minutes south for me, just outside of Calgary, they have one of their programs. It's called a smart farm. And so they've taken agriculture, because we have lots of farms in our area, and technology, and blended it. And so the technology that they have on our huge farms is amazing. And whether it's, milking cows or crops or checking the weather, I mean, and everything in between. So one of the programs that we offer through Careers Next Generation is new to us. We have agriculture and IT and communications, and they're blending beautifully. And it's really cool to see the amount of employment in those areas. Hopefully our energy sector will rebound sooner than later. But in the meantime, holy man, agriculture is busy in our area, in our province.
And I'll just shamelessly,
and Manitoba too, sorry, not just Alberta. I'm just speaking of my province right now.
I'll just shamelessly add that all of the things that we've talked about as surging industries require insurance, and I'll just leave it at that.
Absolutely.
Good point. I'm going to talk about not so much a sector, but a job role. So I work at a public policy school. So we have seen from government roles to IT sectors to local police departments, all having to create policy around pandemic. What are you going to do with your employees? What will you do for your clients? All these different policies are coming out. And I think that in my case, it's very interesting to see areas that are coming out of the woodwork. So now I know we're not job seekers, but I want you to think from a job seeker's perspective. What would be some of the lessons learned from adapting to our new COVID-19 reality?
I would say that we're not in this alone. I mean, we're all faced with this. And I think too, just having these forums, and I know myself in my work, I work from my home even post or pre-pandemic. But I have such an amazing group of colleagues that I can reach out to, whether it's Neo, Trevor, Catherine, now Jolie and Mike, our 2 new colleagues that reaching out and leaning on each other and looking for support or giving support when others need it. I think that's something that we're all faced with, and I think that should hopefully will continue when we are post-pandemic.
I'll echo that for sure. Everyone's kind of said it's the app of the year, and obviously we're only a couple weeks into 2021. But Clubhouse, which actually started kind of in the early part of the pandemic, has really lifted off, and it's a place where people all over the world really are coming together, and it's scaling pretty quickly. And I think the reason for that is because, similar to what Anne just said, is that people they need that kind of connection with people. I think it's a very interesting way of doing that, and so our communities in this isolated way are finding ways to get back together in some pretty cool manner. So I think that as we continue to maybe, I know Zoom fatigue is real, but I think the openness to just being in touch with people that we might see as strangers, becoming friends, I hope that's kind of a long-term trend, because it's something that I've experienced just meeting so many great people, whether they're in the career development space or they're job seekers. That human connection, I think, is great for business. I think it is great, obviously, if you are a job seeker, because you get hired by other people and not necessarily just a resume. So I think that's one thing that will hopefully continue, just kind of observing that on the ground in a place like Clubhouse.
I think too, if I can add something, I know I experienced it, and I know some students too, is that we always say, put your energy on what you can control and let go on what you have no control. I think the pandemic was such a clear-cut situation that it was easier to see what you can't control and act on what anything you could change. So I saw that for some students that it was easier for them to prioritize or see where to put their energy and let go to. I think we all had to let go, and we couldn't control anything. We had to stop. We had to care for each other. So there were good things. But I think that one, the job market, I always say, you have to work hard to find a job. You need to connect, make everything we always tell them. But there's also a big part, don't make scenario, it doesn't help. There are a part you have no control, so just let go. Don't waste your energy thinking about all these things. It doesn't help. But I thought it was easier to help them with that, with the pandemic. It was so out of control.
I think that things like, for students, having career services like the CAT's office, it helps prepare you for that uncertainty. I think it's important to know that things can change. There's always something beyond your control. And, it's a bit of a puzzle, and there's a large part of the puzzle that you have no control over. You could study for one thing and a technology can come out the day before you graduate, and that one thing is gone. So I think it's important to use the services that are available to you.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to throw it over to the audience. Do you have any burning questions that you'd like to ask our experts on this panel?
Catherine, there are some questions in the chat. Should I give you some of those?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Sally Clapper has a question. She was also a presenter. We just love when presenters go to other presenters' sessions, so that's wonderful. But she's talking about, and we get this asked a lot in CATS too, so the little circle that you can put on LinkedIn that says, looking for new opportunities, and she called it ugly, and I have to concur. So she wanted to know what your thoughts were on that.
Anyone? Any takers?
I'm in the camp that that's not really a helpful approach. By everyone doing it, or by many job seekers doing it, is actually harder now to stand out among other job seekers. And just because you are available does not necessarily mean you are a great candidate. So in addition to the aesthetic comment, yes, it probably doesn't go with everyone's background or whatever, but I do think functionally it's not that helpful. And I'd rather people put time and energy into building real brands through a platform like LinkedIn, which is just an amazing, amazing place to do that.
Catherine, if I can just jump here in here to say, because these things drive me crazy when I see people do them, because you are not unemployed. That's not your identity. So you're a person with value and skills and talents. And whenever I see wonderful space being taken up, real estate on LinkedIn being taken up by looking for new opportunities and all that, it's such a waste of the space that's there to actually highlight all the talents. And much like Mike is saying that you do have. So that's something that we certainly tell students who come to see us at CATS, like, yeah, you could use that space for something else. And, there are other ways to know that you're looking for work, and that's not who you are as a person. So so thank you for the question, Sally, and thank you.
I think also it's okay to try stuff, but then you have to move on. When you see it doesn't work, or when you see now there's so many people doing it, you say, okay, let's just try something else. I think it's good to feel you're free, you can explore, try different approaches, because often I find my students, they are a bit shy, or they just see job search as it's just paperwork, and they just do things and say, no, try. So that's why too, I like, yes, me too, I'm not a big fan of that, but at the same time, I like when they just try whatever, and it's not a secret. There's no magic trick, but still, it's, you need to tell people. So I like that, the fact that they are telling people they're looking. So that's because some students, they keep it secret, and we say it's not a secret, you're looking for a job, you should tell people around you. So yeah.
Any other?
Yes, I had a question actually, and it was, I had put it in the chat too. So a lot of our students at the School of Continuing Studies are newcomers. So they already have, you know, some issues with navigating the labor force of wherever they might be in Canada. Now they have the extra challenge of not being able to network in person or do some of the things that they would typically do when they arrive in Canada. Do you have any advice for newcomers during this time?
I think one of the things that's so pivotal is to recognize exactly what we've just been talking about, is that you have skills, you have value, you have a contribution to make. I think the other piece of that is starting to try and understand how you can translate the skills and expertise that you have that may be from another country, but to the fields that you'd like to touch now. So I'll use the example of, for example, if you are somebody with a healthcare background and you're not looking to go through the licensing process, but would like to apply that knowledge and work in the insurance industry. If you talk to me about all of the things that you did in the laboratory and not about the risk management, the health and safety procedures that you followed, the code, the context that I would want those skills in, we start to tune out, and you're asking the employer to connect the dots. Employers aren't great at it. They don't like to play that game. The more explicit you can be in their context and in their environment in terms of how you respond to their need, the better. That being said, in terms of networking, I hear you. Particularly for students and newcomers right now, all of the advice is network, network, network. And in the digital world, it feels like, how do I do that? And one of the things that I'd like to go back to is that storytelling, that branding, that sort of communication. So think about all of the different communities that you can be a part of that are connected to the industry that you want to be in, and how will you participate and add value to those communities to stand out and differentiate as a candidate. And so what are some of the ways that you can lend your expertise to the table, or some of the ways that you can pick up on a point, share an article, or share value that you think would just get you to be recognized and be known. And I think that that's just one of the things that I put out there is use all of these tools in the digital space while we're all paying attention to build your brand and to authentically tell your story.
Yeah, I'm going to build a little bit on what Trevor had said. And I think that, you know, when you're coming to a new country, or if you're going to a new province, you don't have that network yet. And so it really is going to be part of your job to develop that network, and not just develop networks with people that are in the exact profession you want to be in. You'd be surprised how many people can help you, because maybe, you know, their cousin works in that profession, or maybe they'll introduce you to a profession you hadn't even thought about. So networking and looking for opportunities to connect with people in various different ways. And that could be cultural clubs, that could be even attending virtual art shows where you get to chat with the other people that are in the virtual art show.
Yeah, the principle works if you know only one person, let's say a career advisor, you're already starting your network, because let's say you know me, I introduce you to two people so even starting with one person, and it can be us, I think, and we can help you to brainstorm, find a way how to approach a person. But I think you have to see it like step by step, like one person at a time. It can sound very intimidating, but it's, I think we're there. I'm always happy to help with that part too, just to try to make it more concrete. Or I know some of my contact, they're so nice and they're willing to help. So I kind of do some matching and say, oh yeah, that person would be great. So if you have people around like career advisor who want to help you, just use their services. We're there for that. So it's always there.
Yeah. And I think too, Rosalia, don't you at CATS use 10,000 Coffees or McGill Connect to help people connect?
Yeah, we have 10,000 Coffees, which happened to launch during the pandemic. So yeah, and that's certainly helping. And we encourage online networking, which of course is so different, but that's where everybody is right now, as you've all mentioned. So that's where they have to be too. So
I know I can speak personally too. When I started in career development in post-secondary, I went to my very first CACEE conference, and thank God I sat on a bus on a seat right beside Catherine and another colleague from Victoria, and I was absolutely amazed at the information that they shared. It wasn't like, oh, this is what we're doing and we're not going to share anything with you. The information that I came away with from that conference was amazing, and I made a lifelong friend, and I wouldn't be here today if Catherine hadn't asked, but that was all because people reach out within their community. And I think sometimes we have to take that step ourselves, and sometimes it feels a little uncomfortable, but especially right now when we're in the middle of a pandemic, we have to stretch ourselves a little bit and reach out to people in the community, because I think, and I hope for the most part, that we're all here to help each other. But absolutely, I'm living proof that my connections with Catherine and Trevor and Nao from CACEE are what helped me get through the days and provide me with more information regularly. So reach out to your people, or community members that are willing to help out as well.
If I can just make one quick tactical addition to that, because I think we're all on this point around we all have access to community and people who care about us probably more than we think. The more clear that we are on what it is we are looking for. So, for example, going from saying, I'm looking for a job in sales to looking for a job in small to medium sized business enterprise software, there's a big difference in terms of what exactly that means. And for someone who is just getting to know you, it's much easier for them to say, oh, wait, I actually know someone who does technical sales for small to medium sized businesses, or they have a friend who's doing it, who has another friend who's doing it. It just becomes so much more simple for everyone that you meet to then go ahead and say, oh, there's an obvious connection that I can make for you. Let me go ahead and do it. And then, as Julie was saying, the network starts to really grow on its own when you're clear about it.
yeah, and Laura put in the chat, let me go back to that. Speaking as an immigrant myself, I agree with Trevor. One needs to recognize what one brings something valuable to the table, and also your background, resilience, and eagerness, joy to adapt our strengths, and don't hesitate to talk about them. Yeah, absolutely, because certainly newcomers have a lot of strength just by the fact that they're newcomers. Adaptability, flexibility, courage. There's so many just by the virtue of the fact that they left their country or now in a new country, and those are strengths. Sometimes I don't necessarily think are career strengths, but of course they're applicable. There are questions that are to some specific panelists. Is that okay that I go ahead and ask those?
Sure.
So let me just go back here, because I saw a question to Mike. How would you transfer from hospitality sales to technology sales? Are employers afraid to hire because they think you will go back to that industry once the virus is under control?
Well, that's a great question. In terms of answering to whether or not an employer thinks you might jump ship after the pandemic is over, I think that's for you to kind of determine as you go through the softer skills part of the hiring process. Are you showing a real commitment to this new direction? And if you're kind of only going in with 1 foot in and 1 foot out, then I think that might disqualify you. I think sales is a super transferable skill set. And if you're trying to go from something that is non-technical to something that is more technical, there might be a need to get a little bit more of a handle on what exactly you are selling. But I mean, it's really grounded in how well do you interact with people? How are you empathetic and understanding of their needs? sales is an industry. It's a field that's as old as work itself, and it's not going to go away. At the same time, I think it's the doors can be very open for someone who wants to go in. But I think it's just about how you position yourself and build the stories around how you've helped people in the past in your hospitality background, and how can you translate that into tech sales moving forward, showing that kind of a commitment, like I was saying earlier on.
Yeah, certainly. I'm going to build a little bit on what Mike has said and what Trevor said before. It's about storytelling, and it's to be able to tell that story of why you're making that transition and why you know that this is the sector that you want to be in. But there's always going to be that fear, and it would be a lie to say that there isn't a fear of, you know, when your industry opens up, you'll go back. That's why you just need to be able to make the case and show why this is the area you want to be in.
It's almost like when somebody's overqualified, how do you know you're not going to jump back to get a, you know, a better job? And we get that question all the time specifically from newcomers who maybe take a step down to get that experience in Canada. And it's always like, well, they're going to think I'm going to jump ship. So I love that. Yeah. Tell your story on why, on how, you know, and convince them that they won't, that you won't do that. So I see them as similar. Any other thoughts on that? And Catherine, I love that you're answering questions rather than asking them. So we rather have your expertise. So we have, my goodness, 5 minutes left. Is that possible? Yes. Okay. Is there anything, now we have other questions, okay, let me see here. And thank you everybody for putting in links and actually answering questions in there. I love to see that engagement on the chat, and it's really helpful to everyone. So Clarissa says, we see a boom in hiring EDI related positions in different organizations. Do you have anything to share about this? Is there specific courses to take to become a strong candidate? So of course, EDI is equality, diversity, and inclusion. So I love that question. I've certainly seen, you know, anecdotally, so many requests for this. So do you have any thoughts on that?
I'll start with the positions that I see that are EDI related tend to be, just because maybe that's the area that I'm looking in, very HR or people and training related, but I haven't really looked in other sectors or other job areas.
I think the main thing to note about equity, diversity, and inclusion positions, and absolutely it is one of the roles that I was just thinking about, as we didn't mention, as a surge and developing. But I think one of the really critical pieces here is that it's not so much about the courses that you've taken or the training that you've had, but the lived experience that you can demonstrate that you can create a climate of equity, diversity, and inclusion. So for me, it would be much more about you know, the demonstration of that skill set, your tact, your diplomacy, but also your ability to understand, to ask questions, to create meaningful space, to create a climate of safety, to be an ally. Any of the ways that you can demonstrate that and how you're doing the work, particularly if you're from an equity-seeking group where it may not necessarily be readily visible. I think it also is sometimes being brave and telling that story and allowing people to see those facets of your identity in ways that you've been able to navigate and to foster that climate of inclusion elsewhere.
I love that tip of advice. So it's the lived experience. Well, I know I've lived this experience, and I'd love to be, you know, I'd love to actually actively help in that area. So I love that. And maybe people don't think of that and don't think that that's important, but of course, in these roles in particular, it would be. So yeah, that's really wonderful. And we only have a few minutes left, so we'll go with one other question. I know there's questions in the chat. If somebody has a burning question, I don't want them to leave here without it being answered. So if you want to put up your virtual hand or say it out loud, now's your chance with only a few minutes left. Is there anything that somebody really wants answered today and they've just been waiting to answer, maybe not only through this session, but through others?
So hi, I have one question, please.
Yes, thank you.
So yes, I just wanted to add to Mike one that it's all about who knows you. So how can we make ourselves that like more visible to recruiter or employers so that they will know that we can be a value to their team and they can connect with us, like, or like you already mentioned the networking, but how specific would you say that we can approach so that they know us?
I think there's a lot of answers probably out there to that question, but one thing that I try and encourage people to do early on when I'm working with them is to see if they can get their sort of headline or unique value proposition statement down to about 10 words, maybe 12. And oftentimes they start out and it's like 25, and it's like, okay, let's shed 5 to 10 of those, and then let's write a few versions of that. And so that's kind of an exercise in and of itself, is like, how many value statements can I write until I find that there's something that really captures my essence and the value that I bring, and at the same time is standing out a little bit. Like you could say like you're a mechanical engineer in the auto sector, but there's probably a lot of other people, for example, with that exact same title. So can you use your creativity and go through that iterative process to find out like what's the way that I can really get it down, so that if people could only remember me by one thing, what would it be?
Thank you.
Great question.
Thank you very much.
Catherine, did you want, because I see you're unmuted, did you want to add to that?
Oh, sure, certainly. I think that I went to the session last night, the LinkedIn session, which was awesome. And, she talked about the LinkedIn groups and how they really blown up, and it is a strategy to get noticed. To be able to post, I say more academic or industry information and pose really value added questions. And this is an opportunity to make people curious about you. We also talked about looking at other people's profiles strategically so that they see that you looked, so they will look at your profile.
I love that. And I'll ask this as a last question, and now we're literally out of time, but somebody had said, can you talk about informational interviews? So I'll get a little, maybe more specifically, how do you approach someone for an informational interview? So yeah, there's a question of getting noticed, but now you actually want to sit down and talk to somebody because, well, virtually speaking, of course, because they're in an industry you like, or how would you approach them?
I will start. I'm going to say simple is better, and laying it out there. And so, writing a simple LinkedIn message or email to somebody to say, hi, I have all these opportunities, different areas that I'm exploring, and I'm curious about this. Can I have a few moments of your time, 10 minutes, 15 minutes to be able to ask you questions so I have a better understanding of the area. I think kind of laying those cards on the table and being transparent. It's not, hey, do you have a job for me? They don't know you. It's more about you're seeking their advice and their information. Based on what they tell you, you could decide this is not the area for you. You could say, wow, doesn't match with my values and my interests. So I think those informational interviews are incredibly valuable.
I think when you push send, try to be in that other person's shoes and see if I get that message. Is it clear? Can I help to make it? Because it depends if you reach out to a friend of your dad who's the president of a company. It won't be the same tone. It won't be the same way to approach as if it's a TA that you kind of know well. So you need to adapt and be very simple, brief, to the point. How come are you writing to that person? The person will say, how do you know me? What's the how come and want to talk to me? So you need to answer these questions. Why are you contacting that person? What are you asking? One thing, don't be long. It doesn't have to be like it's not a novel. It has to be short and brief. And so the person reads it and say, I can buy the information is okay for sure. But if you're like, and you help me have a job, I'm like, no, I don't know. It's weird. You don't. So fine. But every time you need to think, have a good strategy, make it simple. But ask yourself. For me, I love these conversations. What do you want from that? How do you think that it helps you? Ask yourself first, because it's different from one person to another. Maybe one person maybe has a job for you, but most of the time they don't. But they know, they have information, they have contacts. So you need first realize how can that person help you, and that's what you need to communicate in a very brief and concise way, and play that game. Just go in that person's shoes and say, if I receive this message, how would I react? And oh yeah, I think it's fine, it works, so send it. And don't send 100. Start slowly just to see, do I get reply? Does it work? If it doesn't work, maybe there's a problem. Then go see your career advisor, troubleshoot. It's okay to try, but don't do the same thing too long. If it doesn't work, there's a problem. So we need to find what's wrong. So we need to, it's really you try, but then you validate, you check. You should hear back at some point, not every time, but so we can help you with that. It's fun.
I don't know if other people heard distortion. Was there distortion for you? Okay, so I think I speak Zoom distortion. So let me see if I got this straight. But so Julie, please let us know if what I'm saying is right. But you were saying to be very specific and strategic in what you ask for, and to not ask for a million things at a time, and put yourself in the shoes of the person who's receiving your message. And if you're asking for a million things, or you're saying, hi, can I have a job? That's, put yourself in their shoes. They're not going to like that. So be specific, ask for one thing. And if you have trouble crafting something like that, speak to your career center for help. Did I capture that? Yes. Okay. I wasn't sure if everybody could hear the distortion. So, okay, wonderful. So we've come to the end of this already. An hour passes so quickly, and there were a lot of positive comments in the chat, of course, thanking you all for your expertise and your time. A special thank you to Catherine for organizing this and getting this great panel of speakers together. I can't thank you enough. And I can't thank you all panelists for being here and taking time out of your busy day. So Anne, Trevor, Mike, Julie, did I get everyone? I think so. So it's been a real pleasure. We thank you. And I don't know if there's anything that anybody wants to say of the panelists and Catherine going out as a checkout, or if you just want to leave it at this. But I thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having us. I think it was awesome. I got to be with some of my favorite people and then talk about the subject that I love so much.
What can be better? On that note, everyone have a lovely evening. Enjoy the rest of your day. And we hope to see you one more day of PowerSkills, a few sessions left tonight and many more tomorrow. We hope to see you around. And thanks again, everyone. Truly appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.